Si comes tienes que lavar tu plato, Firulais. Anda, enjuágalo bien. No me gruñas. A ver, con la esponja eso. Y enjuaga bien que luego deja todo jabonoso. Eso así, muy bien, aunque de malas.
Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
You know what I think about Teofimo Lopez? You know, usually you got to rebuild, you got to go back, and it's usually your rebuild fight is, you take a so-so fight. But I think there's a really good rebuild fight for Teo that could really generate interest, and that's Kambosos. You could rebuild on the Kambosos fight because there's an inner built rivalry. Yep. You know, you haven't lost to him. Yep. Kambosos needs to rebuild himself, so they're kind of in the same position, and they typically don't like each other, right? So
there you go.
We'll have more chaos.
Hey, the first fight, say what you will about the performance, the first fight was entertaining. Very good. It was a good fight.
I think that's actually...
Look at the matchmaker. This guy putting his matchmaker hat on.
But seriously, it was always something that you always want to try to avenge later or whatnot, or at least it has to come up at a certain point. But, and maybe you would think about it if Kambosos kept winning and Teo kept winning, you would do that rematch. But instead, they've both fallen off since then now. And now, so sometimes that's what happens. Like, Ray Leonard and Duran 3. It's like later on when it's like you think it's not interesting, but people are going to tune in. People are going to be interested. Granted, hopefully it's not Leonard Duran 3 because that wasn't a great fight. But what I'm saying is, Teo and Kambosos, there's a place for that fight right now, for that rematch right now at this moment in time, I think.
No, he's not wrong.
He's not.
At this time, George Kambosos is coming off a knockout loss to Richardson Hitchens. Teofimo Lopez is coming off a decision loss to Shakur Stevenson. I've always felt that to settle his soul, he needed to run it back with George. The problem was he'd grown too big for the lightweight division.
George winning all those belts, he wasn't going to follow him up to super lightweight, and having won in upset fashion, he was riding high, looking to parlay that victory into a big payday, which he did.
What was that? 4 or 5 years ago? A lot of time and a lot of fights have happened since then that right now, the time is right for Lopez to run it back with George and for George to run it back with him. What big offers are on the table right now for George?
He's not campaigning as a lightweight anymore. At super lightweight, most of those guys chew him up and spit him out, but they don't offer up much money to do it. A Lopez rematch.
Round 2, fight!
I always felt that in spite of how Teofimo looked in that first fight, the stars just aligned for George to upset him. And if they ever ran it back, Lopez would win. Bear in mind, I don't have the highest opinion of Lopez's boxing, but that's the perfect confidence builder for Lopez right now. Stand next to no chance of avenging the loss to Shakur. Too lopsided, bad style matchup. But this one, you can avenge.
Who's gonna pay for it, though? Isn't Lopez still with Top Rank, and isn't Top Rank still between broadcasters right now?
They are. And they would theoretically be the only ones so invested in Teofimo to even want to stage that rematch. There is the off chance that Turkey decides to use Teofimo on one of his shows again, and he affords him that opportunity moving forward for Lopez to become an interesting player at 147. Needs to show that he's not so mentally broken by the loss to Shakur Stevenson that he can recover, that he can rebuild. For him to do that, I think a win over George. You saw the state of him after the fight. His heart was broken, beating himself up, kicking himself while he's down.
His own fucking father had an insult to injury.
Know what I'm gonna say? What I said in my previous video. It's about time that Teofimo Lopez take control of what is his career, because it's his career, not his father's. And if at this point you've outgrown that relationship and you need better instruction than he can give you, now is the time.
I think there'd be a bit of money in a George Kambosos rematch. What Chris Algieri said on the Boxing Scene podcast is true. Lopez versus Kambosos was actually a lot more entertaining than Lopez versus Stevenson and that built-in backstory.
I, as a boxing fan, would not mind seeing that one again. It's a chance for Teofimo Lopez to right that wrong and settle his soul in the process.
Yes, I was mistreated so bad in Las Vegas.
For Canelo-Crawford?
For Canelo-Crawford.
Tell me how.
Me and the other 3 organizations, WBO, WBA, IBF, we were not even given a credential. We were told we could not get into the ring. We were not allowed to go into the dressing room. We were not allowed to be at the commission desk. When we go to a fight, we go to work. It is not a vacation or a fun or like a fan or a reporter that goes to a fight. We are there to work. They are fighting for our championships. The fight was undisputed for the 4 belts. And it was very, very, very disappointing.
Were you given a reason
Never.
as to? So how did
Never,
it go?
never.
Like, hey, I want to do what we usually do, and you were told not happening?
Not happening. No, we were given a ticket to go into the fight outside of the technical zone,
Just with the regular public.
just with the regular public. Anyway, turn the page. They announce their plans and they want to change the law or introduce a new law that goes against the Muhammad Ali Act, which was a long process that Muhammad himself, with Senator McCain, Senator Reid, and others, took a long time to develop and went through the Senate and was approved, mostly to protect fighters in the United States, to have representation with their managers, to demand from the promoters full transparency and disclosure, to protect and have a wall between promoters and boxing commissions, promoters and managers, promoters and organizations, for the protection of the fighter and to reduce any possibility of any wrongdoing. The WBC has to disclose any sanction fees that are charged, any movements in the rankings. When we change a fighter, every year we submit a report to the ABC. And mostly it has brought the opportunity for fighters to make the most money they can make.
That's not the flex Mauricio Sulaiman makes it out to be, because the fighters making the most money they can make isn't necessarily conducive towards the overall health of the sport when they're demanding more money than they can generate, in effect, shortchanging the promoter and the network that put up the money to do a show to begin with.
The fighters making the most money they can make is not the strongest argument to leave the Muhammad Ali Act as is.
Mauricio only highlighted that they're making changes to the act, but he didn't divulge what the changes are, one of which is getting a lot of attention. It would limit alphabet organizations like his to only having one title in circulation at a given weight, not the 2, 3, or 4 you customarily see.
Now explain to me how that's supposed to be a bad thing.
It's not bad for the fans. A lot of the fans are tired of seeing so many different versions of the same title from the same organization at the same weight. It's not bad for them. I don't think it's bad for the fighters either.
Why would it be? What changes? Less trinket titles?
That doesn't affect the fighters more than it affects the sanctioning bodies, 2 in particular.
The WBA and the WBC.
You didn't notice that when Mauricio said they were making changes to the Ali Act? He didn't go into what the changes are.
And why they're bad.
Just giving you an overview of why the Ali Act was made in the first place, which we already know, and it's not even the safeguard that it was intended to be, because fighters still get screwed all the time, Ali Act and all.
Oh yeah, there's supposed to be this buffer between the promoter and the manager, but we see promoters and managers in cahoots all the time, operating in their own best interests, where the manager's supposed to operate in the fighter's best interests. If you start cavorting with the promoter,
that constitutes a conflict of interest.
And what about managers masquerading as promoters, calling themselves promoters without actually staging any shows or brokering any deals with networks? They're really managers, like Samson Lukowicz.
But they call themselves promoters for whatever reason. What about them? That gray area.
Some of the amendments to the Muhammad Ali Act, dubbed the Muhammad Ali Revival Act, a higher minimum per round for fighters. A higher minimum, more than they normally make, more than the national average. What's wrong with that?
That's one of the changes.
Less alphabet titles in circulation per sanctioning body per weight class. What's wrong with that?
That's one of the changes.
And of course, the bigger one, the one that everybody's talking about, what allows for the formation of unified boxing organizations, UBOs, like Zuffa.
That's one of the changes.
But what's supposed to be wrong with that?
If a fighter is weary of either Zuffa or Dana White's business practices, they're not obligated to sign to Zuffa. They can go the regular route.
So what's wrong with that? That's one of the changes. Mauricio claims to have been mistreated at the Canelo versus Crawford event because he was not allowed access to where members of the commission were seated. He was instead seated where the fans are. That's fucking funny. He was not allowed to enter the ring post-fight. And, he says that when they go to these fights, they're not there on holiday and they're not there as fans. They're there to work. What work was it that Mauricio was going to be doing? He's a big guy, standing up for long periods is work for him. No, I'm just saying. The members of the commission that are there to oversee the whole operation since the fight is happening under their auspices. The judges seated ringside. They're there for a specific reason, scoring the fights, as they happen. The referees, obviously. Third man in the ring, officiating the action as it happens and ensuring that rules are being upheld. Production team, camera crews, all there for an obvious reason, doing their work. What work was Mauricio gonna do?
We were mistreated when we arrived. I did not get 3 hot dogs. I got 2. The WBC. Oh, Mauricio didn't get his fill of popcorn and hot dogs. Now he wants to throw a bitch fit. Yeah.
Now, why specifically the sanctioning body presidents, not just Mauricio, were not allowed the same access they customarily get? Your guess is as good as mine. It could be that Dana White, being the registered promoter of note of the show, was not aware of such protocols. Could be a simple miscommunication.
He is the new guy, after all.
Could be that in promoting that show, the access they normally get just got lost in the sauce, lost in translation, and it can be rectified, it can be redeemed. It could be that, or it could be a deliberate attempt to assert power.
Power! Dana White wants to show him who's boss. Doesn't want these guys walking around like they own the place, because they don't. Power! Things are gonna be a little bit different around here. There is a new sheriff in town with a big war chest and a lot of fight dates and a lot of fighters lined up waiting to fight. Power!
And you guys don't run the show. We don't march to the beat of your drum, you march to ours.
Power!
Could be that. If Mauricio felt mistreated, maybe it's because Dana wanted him to feel that way. Maybe.
Maybe the cucumbers taste better pickled. So maybe the next time Mauricio is in attendance for a show that Dana White is promoting, he'll get treated a little better now that he's made this gripe public.
I want 3 hot dogs and 4 cheeseburgers on my head.
You're such a fucking crybaby, Jesus.
I think it would be bad if they pass this bill, the Revival Act.
I do think so.
Why?
From what I have seen, because the fighters will not have representation. They will not have the opportunity to one time make the money that the Crawfords and Canelos and Pacquiao's make. They cannot fulfill the dream of being the WBC champion. Ask any fighter, and I can assure you 90% want the green belt. If not, they want the WBO, WBA, IBF belt.
Right.
They want to be world champions. And they cannot offer that.
I'm no mind reader, but looking over at Ariel Helwani react to Mauricio Sulaiman's explanation as to why these changes would be bad. Oh, because they can't fight for the WBC. If I didn't know better, I'd think Ariel were holding in his laughter at that cockamamie explanation when Jayo Pataya, who just signed to Zuffa Boxing, is supposed to be unifying titles with WBC champion Noel Mikhailian. Perhaps not in his next fight, but it is something they plan on doing. Dana White has addressed it. Mauricio Sulaiman himself has addressed it.
So where does Mauricio get that Zuffa Boxing's fighters won't get the opportunity to box for an alphabet title? It seems something that they are open to. They just tried to sign WBC champion Bam Rodriguez.
Is that supposed to be the biggest consequence?
As a result of the Muhammad Ali Revival Act, Mauricio also talked about representation. Fighters fighting under the banner won't get the same representation inside of that Zuffa Boxing bubble that they get outside of it. But let me remind you of what happens outside of that bubble. Do you remember when Edwin De Los Santos was supposed to be fighting Keyshawn Davis?
Do you remember?
Do you remember that Edwin De Los Santos was under the impression he was supposed to be making a certain amount of money for the fight, and come to find out, he was supposed to be making more than that. But his then handler, Samson Lukowicz,
Do you remember?
oh, he must have told him something else. He must have given him a lower number than he actually stood to make for the fight. Now, why would he have done that?
So he can skim the extra off the top, put it in his pocket.
If you're under the impression that you're only going to make $300,000, but in reality you're going to make $500,000, who gets the other two?
The guy who told you you're only making 3.
And this is a common practice in the sport of boxing. I remember when Jarrell Miller tested positive for all those banned substances, ahead of what was supposed to be the Anthony Joshua fight, they offered Luis Ortiz the fight.
Luis Ortiz's handler was in negotiations with Matchroom, and apparently he didn't tell Luis Ortiz or his trainer what kind of money was on the table. Multi-millions, I think it was 5 or 6. It was a big number, more than Luis had ever made.
After negotiations broke down, it later came out that neither Luis Ortiz or his trainer were told what kind of money they were being offered. And I remember Ortiz's trainer saying, if we would have known that's the kind of money they were offering, we would have took that fight in a jiffy. As it stands, they didn't get to make that.
Many such cases.
So that when Mauricio Sulaiman makes the case that fighters fighting under Zuffa will not get the same representation as the fighters fighting outside of Zuffa, is that the kind of representation you're talking about? It's this gross misconception that the Muhammad Ali Act acts as this safeguard protecting fighters from getting screwed over, when fighters have been getting screwed over for years now. Muhammad Ali Act and all. Maybe it's because the act itself doesn't really have any teeth.
Because it's more of a guideline. There isn't a fucking task force sitting in a cubicle in some government building waiting to enforce the Muhammad Ali Act. It's more of a guideline.
The provisions in it are intended to be upheld. However, they're very easy to work around. A promoter can run around calling himself a manager can run around calling himself a promoter and a manager can reach some sort of an arrangement independent of the fighter, and the fighter would be none the wiser, because how are you supposed to prove it?
The inception of Zuffa boxing and its entry into the boxing space has given a lot of rise to the Muhammad Ali Act and how it actually works. Well, I'm sorry to tell you that it doesn't work at all, because if it did, Al Heyman would not have been able to operate in the sport for as long as he did, doing what he did, acting as both a promoter, brokering deals with networks, and a manager managing fighters, simultaneously an advisor.
As that would constitute a gross conflict of interest. If the advisor providing advice and the manager managing the fighter is also the guy brokering the deal with the network, is he going to operate in the fighter's best interests like he's supposed to, or is he going to operate in his own?
Do what's best for the promotion more than what's best for the fighter.
All I'm telling you is the Muhammad Ali Act was never foolproof. That Mauricio Sulaiman wants to fall back on that.
Bitch, please.
Many of the additions, I wouldn't even say changes to the Ali Act, are actually a good thing. You just don't like that it allows for the formation of UBOs. But fighters are still at liberty to not sign to these UBOs. So, what's the problem?